Now it's time to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Mr. Leslie.
Hello, everybody. My name is Leslie, and I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank Joy for my box. I was so worried. I thought I'm just going to be a little sober floating head, because without my box, I don't think you would have been able to see me at all. I'm also a recovering crystal methamphetamine addict. I realize that this is a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I'm a very firm believer that alcoholism is the disease, and it can manifest itself in a plethora of addictions, from drugs to alcohol to sex to shopping to anything. So if you're dealing with your addiction to anything and you're in this room, I'd like to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. We have a lot of new people here tonight, and when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was really sick. I don't think we talk enough about how long it takes just to get physically sober. You know, I hesitate to tell this story because it's so frightening to a newcomer, but I was 3 years sober. I was an intravenous crystal meth user, which I had a lot of shame about, because when I was 19 years old, I got hepatitis, and then for 20 some odd years didn't do that, and that was a line I said I would never ever cross, but I did. But anyway, when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was really, really sick. 3 years completely sober, and I went and I got this deep tissue massage. Now, I've done a lot of studies on crystal methamphetamine, the way it can embed itself even into your bone marrow. You know, it takes a long time to get the shit out of our systems. I was 3 years sober, and I went and I got this really deep tissue massage, and I walked out of there high. And I called my sponsor, Don Norman, who is the super sponsor of all sponsors. But he said, you know, honey, it's feelings coming up. I said, no, it's not. I'm high. I know high. It's not feelings coming up. I'm high. And it was really, that was my final hurrah, you know, and I was 3 years in. When I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, I couldn't think straight. My synapses weren't firing correctly. My blood sugar was awry. Someone talked about shaking. I shook for a full year. They used to call me the little chihuahua, because I just sat there and shook. But when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, the very first meeting I went to, I don't know how I got there. It was a straight meeting. I'm gay. I just outed myself at Rodeo. No. But anyway, I wandered into this straight meeting, and I've always had a lot of shame my entire life because I was such a sissy. I mean, I opened my mouth and 50 yards of purple chiffon come flying out. It's just... You know, it's just the way I sound. I constantly on the telephone, people say to me, ma'am. And, you know, I mean, I kind of say, oh, it's because I'm Southern. No, it's because you're a fag. But I get it constantly. You know, they'll say, ma'am, ma'am. And I say, I'm not a ma'am, I'm a sir, especially when I'm angry, you know. I'm a gay sir, but I'm a sir. But I had a lot of shame when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous about the fact that I was so effeminate, because I didn't get sober till I was 42 years old. And when I was 42 years old, you took away all my medicine. You know, I had been using for 33 years, and you took away all my medicine. If you had asked me before I got sober, you know, Mr. Jordan, are you openly gay? Are you a proud gay man? I would have said, listen, I've ridden floats for 20 years. I've been in every gay pride celebration from San Diego to San Francisco, Boston, out to P-Town, down to Key West. You know, I have ridden floats, but, you know, so strung out on, you know, crystal and ecstasy and vodka. All of a sudden, 42 years old, you took away everything. You know, you took away all my medicine, and I was absolutely riddled with internal homophobia. I didn't, you know, I had forgotten I was a sissy. I had completely forgotten. And I walk into this meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was over there in the valley. I think it's called Moore Park. The Moore Park noon meeting I walked into. And I sat down, and I had been in jail. I'd been sentenced to something like 120 days for several indiscretions I'd really rather not discuss right now. But I was real popular. But no, I was, because I'm a good storyteller. That's like gold in jail. But anyway, I walked into this meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love when I see newcomers come in with their armor. You know, it's like sunglasses and maybe the black leather jacket and whatever, and you see people get sober and they slowly begin to shed whatever. I walked into that meeting, I had a fishing hat. I've never fished in my life. I had this fishing hat and this like rubber slicker. I don't know, it wasn't raining. And I got in there and I sat down, and near the end of the meeting, the leader said, would our new friend like to introduce himself and say hello? And the oddest thing, you know, crystal methamphetamine and alcohol had rendered me mute. It's really hard to explain, but I couldn't speak. I had been doing speed for so long that my synapses weren't firing correctly, and I couldn't put my words together. And it was frightening because I'd be trying to talk to you. But because I'm an actor by trade, when they called on me, I guess my acting, it's because it was the weirdest thing. For years, I could speak on a group level. Okay, I was a share whore. You know, I was the one that you groan when the hand comes up. I could speak on a group level, but what I could not do is speak to you individually, one-on-one. I was scared to death to speak to you. But I raised my hand. I mean, they called on me, and I began to speak. And I told, you know, a little bit about the shame I had from being in jail and la, la, la. And I got this applause, and I thought, wow, you know. And then they called on Mikey from Brooklyn, who, by the way, heterosexual, big Mikey from Brooklyn, who told my story. Newcomer, you're going to hear your story from someone you wouldn't think in a million years would have your story. And Big Mikey from Brooklyn, the straight guy, told my story. He talked about the broken toys and how we were just kind of like a bunch of broken toys that had been tossed in this room, and we're all in there together. And I don't know, he told my story. But this particular day, my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, they called on me and I shared, and all of a sudden from the back, they called on Mikey. They said, Mikey, would you like to wrap it up? And Mikey said, to the young lady that just got out of jail. I was just horrified. And everything got perfectly quiet, and everybody's going, Mikey, that's not a girl, that's a boy. And I just stood there, I thought, well, oh God, I gotta get out of here. I'm never coming back. If public humiliation is part of getting sober. So I tried to get out the side door, and this great big, huge guy grabbed me. He had tears in his eyes, and he said, I don't hear well, and I didn't mean to embarrass you. I really didn't, and I hope that you come back. Well, listen, you know, we see these bumper stickers on the wall, newcomer, that we spout, you know, but no one had invited me back anywhere for a really long time. And he kind of stood there, and I'm from a southern family where manners are of utmost importance, and I thought I had to, like, RSVP, like I had to tell him right there that I was going to be there or not. And he said, I hope you keep coming back. I hope you come back tomorrow. And I said, okay. That was October 20th, 1997. You know, that was 13 years ago. And that began this amazing this journey. I have so much on my mind right now. This is almost an outside issue, but I just really feel I need to address it because there's so many new people. There are certain celebrities that are in the news right now that are having these like public meltdowns. And I am absolutely transfixed. I can't quit looking. Now, what infuriates me is when someone begins to denigrate my lifeline. When someone who's been given that national platform and they're spouting nonsense like, oh, I was sober for 5 years, the most boring thing in my life. Alcohol Anonymous is for losers, and, you know, it's got a 5% success rate. What is he basing that upon? Alcoholics Anonymous, newcomer, is in every country almost in the world. There's not a CEO alive that can say that that they have in thousands upon thousands of people have gotten sober. What you are witnessing, newcomer, is an addict and an alcoholic backed against the wall and fighting tooth and nail for their right to continue to get high. And it's not pretty. You know, it doesn't matter that there's 200 some odd people out of work, maybe a single mother who works in the makeup department, you know, out of work because of this person's selfish behavior. It doesn't matter that there's children involved, you know. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters when you back an addict or an alcoholic up against the wall and try to take away their right. And I don't know how it'll end. I will tell you this from having sponsored for many years, the hardest people to get sober are people with money, are people that have any kind of power at their disposal. I've been through this time and time again where you're just, it exhausts me, but it also saddens me, you know. And here's what's interesting. When I got sober 13 years ago, everything that this celebrity had was what I wanted, what I desperately wanted. I've wanted to be famous since I was 3 years old. I would make speeches, you know, my Oscar speech. I've been making that since I was 4 or 5 years old. I had a professor in college. I love it when, you know, a plumber can get up and talk about, you know, their job and people are like listening. And anytime an actor wants to talk at all, people roll their eyes. But you know what? Hey, this is my reality. We're in a room where probably 50% of the people are in the entertainment industry, so I ain't gonna tiptoe around it. So when I was in acting school, I had a teacher who said to me, he said, Leslie, you are capable of genuine artistry, but you are the laziest actor I've ever come across. And you're short and you got that funny face and you're probably going to go out there to Hollywood and be in sitcoms and blah, blah, blah and on and on. And I don't know what you want out of this. I mean, 4 years now we've been trying to get you to stretch and la, la, la. And for meanness, I looked at him and I said, you know what I want? I want to walk into a 7-Eleven in Omaha, Nebraska, and I want everybody in there to shit and fall back in it. I have wanted to be famous forever and ever. Everything that man has, the fame, I had this dream. I used to think, I would lay in bed and imagine my life, what my life would be like if I got a big TV series. And this is what it would be like. This is long before Hugh Hefner with the 7, you know, playmates lived with him. I wanted a house in the Hollywood Hills with about 7 or 8 beautiful young boys, like giggling. No, I had this all planned out. And they were going to giggle and, like, roll all over me, and we were going to, like, and I would think it through. I would say, wouldn't it be fun, like, party, just nonstop, people coming in and out and going to the bars down to WeHo, and here we come, and I'm in a Bentley and with the top down, and I got these boys, and then we'll party like Friday and Saturday, and then won't Sunday be fun because, like, we'll be out of drugs by then, and we'll just, like, lay around and barbecue and drink. I mean, this was what I wanted when I got sober. I'm telling you. I wanted it more than, and I chased it, and I chased it, and I chased it. And it's so interesting to me that 13 years into this, carrots are now being dangled, you know, in front of me where there's some reality, some of this stuff could maybe happen. And it's the furthest thing from my mind. You know, I put everything that I have is a direct result of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I said, when I was a kid, I had so much shame because I was this little sissy. My daddy was a lieutenant colonel in the Army. Hello. I was not exactly the son that he envisioned, you know. My mother, I think, my sweet mother and my grandmother, Miss Mary Lucille and Miss Peggy Ann, took one look at little Leslie and they thought, oh, he's going to need some help. And they circled the wagons, as only good Southern women can do, and they created this amazing little secret garden where it was okay for little boys to play with dolls. It was okay for little boys to read Trixie Belden and Nancy Drew instead of those ratty old Hardy Boys. You young kids have no fucking idea what I'm talking about there. Just Twitter on, honey, Twitter on. But little boy who could make pot holders and sew doll clothes. I was very artistic, but I was really good. But the deal was I was allowed to do whatever I wanted except well, honey, let's just don't show Daddy. So even though, as a kid I was allowed to do what I thought what I want, I knew that there was something deeply shameful about what I was and who I was. My daddy was killed in a plane crash when I was 11 years old, which is a horrible time for a boy to lose his dad. But I knew at 11, to the core of my being, that my daddy went to his grave ashamed to have a son like me. And I carried that baggage my entire life. When I was, my dad died when I was 11, 12, 13. When I was 14 years old, I came from a very teetotaling family. We were Baptist, which is something else I had to deal with. I've been baptized 14 times. And we don't sprinkle, honey, we dunk, They couldn't dunk me clean. Every time that preacher would say, "Come forward, lost sinner, and be washed in the blood of the Lamb," I'd think, "Ooh, that's me, I better go." And my mother, because I had this secret, and my mother would say, "Son, remain seated, you're already saved." But I would go, but I can remember, my daddy's killed in this plane crash, and I have all of this shame. I'm about 14 or 15 years old, and I had a friend who was an Episcopalian. Ooh. And they drank alcohol, and it was New Year's Eve, and she invited me down. We were going up the street to a block party. We were 14 years old. My parents were at a New Year's Eve party at the pastor, Brother Baker's house, and I started drinking out of her parents' liquor cabinet, and we didn't know how to drink, so we had coffee cups. It was just everything, bourbon, whiskey, cream de menthe. Ooh, look at this. But I can remember, I see kids today that seem so confident. I don't know. I was this awkward kid. I didn't even know what to do with my hands, and I was such a little sissy, and all of a sudden that alcohol hit me, and I was adorable. Honey, I was precious. It didn't matter. It didn't matter that I was effeminate. Nothing mattered. Nothing mattered. And I think, I do a lot of work with recovery, but in the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender community, because I think that's part of it. But shame is shame. I tell this story and I have people come up to me and say, "You know what, I was a fat kid. I grew up poor." That's a big one. The shame of growing up without, the shame of this. For some reason, I think what we're looking for, I think what alcoholics are looking for is our authentic self. I think that when we discovered drugs and we discovered alcohol, we were able to be what we thought was our authentic self. We could be. I have to tell you, at 55 years of age, I stand before you today, and I'm closer to my authentic self than I have ever been. And it is a direct result of the work that I have done in Alcoholics Anonymous. When I did my first fourth step, my sponsor, who was straight, Irish, and real cute, but anyway, said to me, "Leslie, it seems to me that your greatest fear in life is heterosexual men." I said, "Well, no shit, it wasn't exactly a picnic on the playground. You may not remember dodgeball, I do." Smear the queer, and I had to tap dance. I was just in London. I had the funniest thing happen. I was in London. I have a one-man show that's based upon my recovery that just played like a house on fire in the West End. And I had a dodgeball joke, and I realized really quickly they don't have dodgeball in England, so I tried to explain it to English people. I said, "It's a game for children. Heinous. It's an exercise in terror. You divide the children up like firing squads, And then you give the ball, which, by the way, is almost always the color of dried blood. I don't know if you remember that red ball. And then you throw it, and hit these kids. And so I was the one that was just tormented, But my sponsor said, "Your fear, Leslie, is straight guys." And he said, I highly suggest that you join an all-male, all-stag recovery group. I thought my bowels were going to let go. To me, that was the scariest thought to walk into a room filled with heterosexual men, with straight guys. I mean, a room in which you're supposed to tell your innermost secrets. I remember I said to him, I said, you know, when you asked me to, when I asked you to sponsor me, you asked me, was I willing to go to any lengths? And I said, yes, but I don't think I can do that right now. I'm weak, I'm sick, I'm got less than 60. He said, I want you to join an all-male, all-stag recovery group. I go over the hill to Radford Hall. Try Radford Hall on a Monday night. You could cut the testosterone with a knife. There is about 100 guys in there, butchest guys you've ever seen. Listen, they don't sing happy birthday like we just did. They get in that huddle from football, you know, huddle, and they go, ooh, 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 oh! And then there's all that backslapping, you know, and that's all that spitting. I'm 55 years old. I've never had to spit my entire life. I don't know what these guys spit. But anyway, I walk in there with 100 of the butchest guys I've ever seen. And my first thought, I looked around the room and I thought, oh my God, I should have left my Merce in the car. The Merce, a Merce, in case you don't know, is a gay man's, we call it our male purse. You know, like straight guys carry bags, but it's in the way that certain gay men carry it that makes, as if had I left my bag in the car, none would have been the wiser. That would have been the only thing that gave me away. But I walked in, and I had my bag, and like I said, I shook a lot early in sobriety, and I found a seat, and I sat there holding the side of the chair because I was shaking so much. And we went around the room. It was one of these where you go around the room and introduce yourselves. And I tried this trick I've used most of my life. There's a certain way that straight guys in the deep South talk. I think it has something to do with tobacco in the mouth. But they don't move their lips, you know. They just kind of talk like that. So they got around to me and, my name is Leslie, and my name is Leslie, and I'm out. Honey, they were on to me. I mean, it was just pitiful. But you know, near the end of the meeting, the leader, and I don't know if you've ever been to Radford Hall, but it's like this. It's a podium share. You have to walk up, you know, which is so frightening to new people. But it's a baptism by fire, and it's something you learn to do. And you learn to stand here and just tell the truth. They said, would our new friend like to come up and introduce himself and tell his story? And I'd heard this really funny story. I had been going to this all-gay recovery group, and there was this big old queen, and honey, I mean queen. This one made me look like a Hell's Angel. This was like... This big queen told the funniest story I've ever heard in AA. He said that when he very first got sober, they made him go and tell his story to a group of straight people, and it scared him so bad he called his sponsor. And he said, I've got to go talk in front of straight people tonight. Do you think I should tell them just right off the bat that I'm gay? And his sponsor said, honey, you got to walk to the podium. They're going to know. So they called on me to walk up to the podium, and it was probably the longest 5 steps of my life. But I got up there to the podium, and I looked out, and it was 100 of the butchest guys I've ever seen. It was. You know, when I was a kid, my mom was a champion baton twirler. Aren't they all in Tennessee? But she taught me to twirl the baton when I was about 7 years old, and I was really good. And I could throw it under my legs, and I could spin, and I would get out in the yard and twirl, and my poor daddy would come home with all of his army buddies, you know. I'm like, Daddy, watch me twirl. Daddy, watch me twirl. So... You know, my daddy would call me son like he was in deep pain. He was just like, oh, son. But my daddy would say to me, you know, why don't you twirl in the house. And I said, well, Mama's scared I'll break something. He said, I will pay for whatever you break. But when I stood in front, when I got to that podium and I stood there, it was like this acid flashback. It was my daddy and all his army buddies. It was every masculine guy. It was the Tuschinski. That's the one that would holler, smear the queer, and hit me with that ball. I want to go back. I have this fantasy that I get to go back to my hometown. My 35th high school reunion is coming up. I may go back because I want to find that Tuschinski, and I want to tell him, because of you teasing me so unmercifully, I learned to be funny, and I did. It's my defense mechanism. It's what I have to watch up here too. Because of you, I learned to be funny because I learned at an early age I could keep the bullies at bay if I could make them laugh. So because of you, I learned to be funny, and I really would like to thank you. But real quick before I go, I'd also like to tell you to kiss my rich, gay ass, mother. No, I'm not rich. I'm not rich, but he doesn't need to know that. But anyway, I stood there in front of this sea of heterosexual men, and something very cathartic happened. I think I had about 60 days sobriety at the time. And I looked out over this group of sober men, and I remember I thought, something very cathartic. I thought, this is the jumping off point. This is it. It's like sink or swim, do or die. And I took a deep breath and I said, hello, my name is Leslie. I'm an alcoholic. I'm also a recovering crystal meth addict, but there's something else that I feel the need to say out loud in front of you men for my sobriety, and that is I'm a homosexual. There was like this dead silence, like where the fuck is this going? And I was waiting for the one, smart aleck in the back, no shit, but no one, it was like no one breathed, so I forged on. I said, I am scared to death of you men. I said, my daddy was a lieutenant colonel in the Army. He was killed in a plane crash when I was 11. It's a horrible time for a boy to lose his dad. I've lived most of my life feeling that I do not measure up in any way. And I'm afraid that you're going to be disgusted by me. I'm afraid you're going to laugh at me behind my back, and I'm really afraid that you're going to shun me. But I was given direction to join this group. And I am too frightened right now to not take direction. So I guess this is what you call a surrender. When that meeting was over, the unconditional love that those 100 sober men extended me, it was overwhelming. I mean, I became that night a part of something very, very important. I never missed a meeting for 4 years. I mean, I sort of became the meeting mascot, We got a queer, yeah. But the oddest thing happened. This is not what I came into Alcoholics Anonymous for. Without me asking, those 100 heterosexual men began to slowly teach me what it means to be a man. See, my entire life I have thought that it had something to do with how much weight you could lift, how far you can throw the football, how many women you've bedded, things that I will go to my grave a dismal failure at. These men taught me that a man has to have a code in which he lives his life by. We talk about the 12 steps as something that we work. It's more something that we live. It is a code in which I live my life by today. And those men taught me that it does not matter one iota that I never learned to walk or to talk like a man. As long as I remain true to my code, I am a man. And that was one of the greatest gifts that could ever have been given. And it's not something, that I came in here looking for. It's something that we do that fourth step, where they taught me that all of our defects, like I said, it's interesting, everything I was ashamed of growing up, the fact that I'm a sissy, the fact that I open my mouth and a pearl necklace falls out, I have been able to turn into something that I've made a lot of money at, I've been able to turn that all around, like whatever your shame is, whatever. It was interesting, my daddy, who I thought, my entire life was ashamed. I'm 53 years of age, and my mother loves to be the harbinger of news. She lives in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I grew up. Here's the problem. When my mother is the harbinger of news, she's sort of like a dog on linoleum, or a hog on ice. There's like a whole lot of activity, but the story just sort of gets nowhere. And so she was trying to tell me this story. It was my 53rd birthday. And I have lived my entire life thinking that my dad was so ashamed of me. And newcomer, this is the way in which you're going to realize growth. It's going to be some odd little something where you think, wow. My mother said that when I was 3 years old, my daddy wanted to take me to a wedding. And she said, Alan, he's 3 years old. He can't sit still in a wedding. And my daddy said, well, my army buddy's getting married. I want to take my boy. I want to show my boy off. Mother said, well, I'll go with you, and I'll see if I can't keep him still in the pew. Well, it was a disaster. I was an excitable boy. I was all over that pew. I was up, I was down, I was in, until my mother said, the bride swept down the aisle, and Mother said, I froze like a pointer dog. And she said I couldn't get my eyes off that bride. Well, when we got home, my little cousin Karen, we're both 3, she heard us in the next room, and we were playing, instead of bride and groom, we were playing bright and goon. And I was the bride. I had an angel food cake pan on my head, and I had taken Mama's white terry cloth bathrobe and slipped it on backwards. It was empire waisted off the shoulder. It was just beautiful. And And that Christmas, my daddy, with all of his army buddies, took me down to Loveman's department store to sit on Santa Claus' lap. And I proudly announced to everybody gathered that what I wanted Santa Claus to bring me was a bride doll. And my daddy went home and said, Peggy, over my dead body, I'm going to get that boy a bride doll. And Mama said, well, Alan, just don't mention it again. I'm sure he'll forget about it. Christmas Eve, my mama said it was all I could talk about, Santa Claus is going to bring me a bride doll, Mama. It's going to be so beautiful. So she went to my daddy and she said, Alan, are you going to explain it to him in the morning? Because I don't know what to say. 1958, she said, my lieutenant colonel of a daddy scoured Chattanooga, Tennessee, and found his 3-year-old boy the most beautiful bride doll. Mama said it stood life-size to a 3-year-old, and it was in a box and staring out of cellophane. And she said when I came down the steps and I saw it, I squatted in the floor and peed. Now, with all due disrespect to the Christian right, ain't none of that choice shit here. 3-year-old boys don't pee in the floor when they see a bride doll, But what I've been able to learn in Alcoholics Anonymous is that the biggest guy in that meeting, the one that I was most scared of, this great big guy came up to me one day and he said, here, I'll give you something. And it was the sweetest thing. He had laminated a card for me. And on the card, he said, it said, what you think of me is none of my business. He said, you need to carry this in your wallet. And I still have it. I carry it in my wallet. I value the opinion of each of you as my fellow human beings, but I have to say, I'm really serious when I say I don't give a shit what you think of me. What I think of me is really important. I'm going to touch just very quickly, because I've got 5 minutes, on the whole God thing. I was very touched by one of our birthday girls who's in the throes and in the struggle of that. I think because of what happened to me when I was a kid that I am spiritually damaged. I think to tell a little boy, and I do not mean in any way to make fun of your religion, if this is part of your belief, because the one thing that Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me is that I will honor the sanctity of all religions. The only religion I personally embrace is the religion of love, the religion of tolerance, the religion of AA. But I think to tell a little boy that deep within the earth is a red man with horns who's stoking this fire, I think that's spiritual abuse. I do, and I think it borders on physical abuse. I am so damaged spiritually because of what happened to me when I was a kid, growing up gay in the Baptist church, that it took me years and years of work in Alcoholics Anonymous to discard. You know, I hear people all the time say, well, I didn't have much religion around growing up. Oh, my God, honey, you are so ahead of me. You have no idea what I had to discard so I could begin to find something of a loving nature, you know. The first time I ever did ecstasy, I went into this bar called The Probe. It used to be down on Highland. It was a leather bar. How do you straight boys know about The Probe? The Probe was a leather bar. And I was fresh off the boat. I still was in penny loafers and no socks and khaki pants and little button-down Oxford cloth shirts. I looked like I stuck out like a rat turd on rice. But I went in and there were all these leather queens, you know, and this would have been, you know, like 80, maybe 80, 79, 80. And you walk in and you look down on the dance floor and there were thousands of gay men in all kinds of decadent attire and all kinds of drug-induced stupors, and they were dancing, and I had swallowed that ecstasy and maybe a little bit of crystal, I can't remember. But anyway, I was looking down on this crowd, and all of a sudden, the dance floor went red, and I saw that fucking lake of fire. It was a sea of burning cocksuckers, far as you could see, and I started screaming, and I'm telling you, I ran up Highland and took a left out Sunset Boulevard. The sun came up, and I was still running from the devil. I have ran from the devil. I have ran from the devil my entire life. Now, here's the story. Here's the story really quickly, though. I have tried, you know, over the years to believe in something and this and that. And, you know, the beautiful thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is that our concept of a power greater than ourselves can grow and change the way we grow and change. I seek. I think that's the best we can do. I sit there sometimes on television and watch those people, and God said to me, and blah, blah. I think, you are so full of shit. You know, and I think we seek. We keep an open heart. I mean, I would love a God that does not do for me or to me, but only shines through me. Have I found him? No. Birthday girl, you seek. You keep an open heart, you know, on a daily basis. That's the best that, you know, that I can do. But I have to tell you that as long as I wake up in the morning and I do that third step prayer to the walls a lot of mornings, I get glimmers, you know, but I just seek. I love what a friend of mine said one time. A friend of mine said to me, you know, I think what I am is a very enthusiastic agnostic who would love nothing better than to be proved wrong. But as it stands right now, if he's up there, he's got some splaining to do. But we seek, you know, we keep an open heart. And I have this amazing life. I wish I could sit with each of you and tell you, you know, if you stay sober, you'll win an Emmy. I got that in. So, no. But I wish that I could say that if you stay sober, because I'm an alcoholic that's gotten some cash and prizes. But if you said to me, okay, look, Leslie, you can have the house in the hills. You can have the 7 beautiful boys, you know. You can have that. But, you know, I watched that guy, that celebrity. He's gaunt. He's gray. He's sad. And he is fighting. And they said, but you know, that's where you're going to end up. You know, because I can stand before you today, like I said, closer to my authentic self than I've ever been. And it's a direct result of the work that I've done in this program. And I wish you all the very best. And thank you for letting me share.